All songs have melody and an underlying harmony, in other words, chords. Some songs are built on as few as 1, or sometimes 2 or 3 chords. James Brown famously stays on 1 chord throughout the entire section of some of his songs, like Sex Machine, for example, and that really serves to build up the tension and anticipation for the release that finally comes in the bridge. But other songs are more complex and built on longer progressions that contain many different chords. Now, different sections of a song, like the verse or the chorus or the pre-chorus or the bridge, can contain different chord progressions. Sometimes they're variations of the same chord progression, and sometimes they're even the exact same chord progression, but with the melody that's different. But when you're writing a song, you'll need, at the very least, a couple of chords and a melody. Now, there's no hard and fast rules about what comes first, the chords or the melody. But having said that, though, the melody is going to be what grabs the listener's attention. That's going to be the part they'll remember and sing that's memorable. No one sings a chord progression when recalling a song that they like. But sometimes starting out with some chords to work with is a good foundation to use to stimulate some melodic ideas. Other times, a strong melodic idea might come to you, and then all you need to do is harmonize it by putting chords underneath. In any case, a knowledge of how to string together chords into chord progressions is essential in crafting a good song. Now, there are strong and weak chord progressions. Weak chord movement isn't necessarily a bad thing, though. You need to have contrast in your song between the different sections in order to keep the listener's interest, and chords are one way of offering that contrast. So, a verse, for example, that has a weaker chord progression but with a strong and interesting melody and lyric could work very nicely along with a chorus that has strong chord movement and a simple repeating melodic hook that the listener can grab onto. So it's all about contrast, and chords are one way of developing that. So what makes a chord progression strong and what makes it weak? Well, here are some of the attributes of strong chord progressions. They have common tones between adjacent chords, and the most typical standard strong chord progression you're going to come across and use is the 1-4-5 progression. In the key of C, that would be C, F, and G. And they share common tones. The C and the F chord both have a C in them, and the G and the C chord both have a G in them. But you can also have chord movement that does have common tones that aren't strong. Like, for example, if you go C, E flat, C, that's not strong chord movement, even though the E flat and the C chords both have a G in common. So common tones between adjacent chords is one attribute, but also root movement of a fifth. Now that leads for very strong harmonic movement. You have dominant going to tonic, G to C. So you go C up to F is a fourth, and then G to C is a fourth. So movement of a fifth or a fourth, depending if you're ascending or descending, is very strong harmonic movement. Another thing that makes a strong chord progression is exclusivity of key. If all the chords belong to the same key, and in the case of 1-4-5, they do. C, F, and G are all in the key of C, and F being the subdominant and G being the dominant are strong chords within that key. And there's also an essence of tension and resolution that makes a strong chord progression. And 1-4-5 is the perfect chord progression because you have 1, which is the home key, and then you have F, which gives the sense of going somewhere different, and then G is the tension that wants to take you back home to 1. There's your 1 chord, and then you're going somewhere, and now the tension that has that leading tone in it that wants to bring you back up home. So let's look at some strong chord progressions. Here's an example, and this goes from 1 to 2 to 5 and 1. Now this is strong because it has root movement of a fourth between the D minor and the G, and then the G and the C. So that's a very strong cadence going 2 to 5 to 1. Here's what it sounds like. And these are just vanilla root position or simple inversion chords. The most standard cadence you'll come across, 2-5-1. Here's a variation of that with 7th chords. 2 minor 7, 5 7 1. So it gives a bit more color. And now here's another variation of that where we have 1 to 4, 5, and 1. So look what's happening here. We're in the key of F. Here's our key signature. We have the 1 chord and then 4 and 5 in the next bar leading back to 1. This is one way of using the 1, 4, 5. We're going to explore different ways throughout the videos because it is the most commonly used progression. But here's one way where you have 1 and then the 4, 5 acting as the tension bar, bringing you back to 1. And now our next chord progression is another variation. We're in the key of D now. Let me back it up and just explain what's going to happen here. We have 1, 6, 2, 5, which is a very standard type of pattern. Here are the Roman numerals here. So in the key of D, we go down to the 6th, and then we're moving through fourths, which is strong harmonic movement. B minor to E is a fourth, E minor to A is a fourth, and then A back to D is a fourth. So they're all in the key of D, so they all imply the exclusivity of key. You really feel that D is the 1 chord or the tonic, and it has strong root movement and lots of common tones in between. You can see by the way I've voiced the chords here that they share a lot of common tones. You're probably already hearing melodies on top of them. Now the next chord progression is also a strong one, and here we're going to go 1, 3, 6, 2, 5. Now the 3 chord is the new chord we're introducing here, but it makes for strong chord movement because the 3 and the 1 are very closely related. In the key of C, which is what we're going to go to, the 3 chord is E minor, and they share both the E and G in common, so 2 common chord tones makes them very closely related. Yet it's a different color. Here's what it sounds like. So there we have 1, 3, the nice new color, the 6, which is minor, and it's kind of a different harmonic place from the 1 chord, and then the 2, 5 leading us back to 1. So we've got tension and resolution, we've got the sense of going somewhere and then coming back. We're not going too far away for too long, so just a nice amount of movement to make it a nice strong chord progression. So stay tuned. In the next video, we're going to look at some weak chord progressions and how they can work.